Football was once dominated by players with huge personalities. George Best, a wizard on the pitch, a playboy off it. Paul Gascoigne could make the game look easy, but was enigmatic and wild. Eric Cantona, a maverick whose unpredictability either resulted in brilliance or chaos. When you compare these iconic figures to modern footballers, the contrast couldn't be more obvious. Today's players are far more professional and disciplined, but equally robotic, predictable, boring. Whilst this shift towards professionalism is better for the game on the pitch, it's left a chasm between fans and players off it. It's become almost impossible to relate and emotionally invest in footballers. Yes, the three people mentioned have all had their controversy, but their flaws made them human. It made them interesting. The polished, squeaky clean modern footballer is the complete opposite. So, what caused this change? Why are footballers so boring? With the money and eyeballs surrounding the game, clubs and players no longer just represent a specific area and community, they also represent their sponsors on a worldwide scale. As a result, public relations or PR has become one of the top priorities of a football club. To prevent any PR mistakes, young footballers across the world are media trained. It gives academy players their first experience in how to deal with the press face to face and also online. It's theoretically a positive thing for footballers, clubs and sponsors. However, in the context of players' personalities, media training is a crucial reason why football's great characters are seemingly a thing of the past. It was introduced into the game in the late 80s and the early 90s. When the likes of Best, Gascoigne and Cantona were coming through, it was non-existent.
When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you.
In today's world, footballers are almost programmed to answer and avoid questions in a certain way. Media training, essentially kids, is making players hyper-conscious and fearful of the press at a tender age. No wonder every pre- and post-match interview feels formulaic, robotic, and all pretty much the same, no matter the player. Footballers tiptoe their way through questions, constantly afraid of saying the wrong thing. Now, I'm not suggesting that clubs stop this training. We've seen on countless occasions the media witch hunt footballers. It's a threat that young players have to be protected against. However, I don't believe media training is the net positive it's made out to be. I'm sure there are interesting and engaging characters that exist in dressing rooms across the world, similar to those of the past. But sadly, modern footballers have been taught to suppress their personalities whilst doing anything public-facing. It's stopped players from being authentic and relatable. It's made them uniform. It's got to the extent where we now praise footballers who answer questions in a less conventional way. Think of Jack Grealish.
Hello.
He's basically become an English national treasure because he's always authentically himself. He isn't afraid to show who he is publicly, but sadly, the majority of players are. Media training is protecting football clubs and sponsors, but I think it's harming football players. Talking of the media, I believe they play the biggest part in why modern footballers appear so boring, but I also think they hold the key to solving this issue. Footballers are fed the same old questions.
James, how do you sum that one up?
Therefore, us as fans are fed the same old answers.
Tough day at the office, yeah.
However, Gary Neville's The Overlap is an example of how a footballer's personality should be showcased. The interviews are refreshing as the players he talks to clearly feel comfortable to be themselves. Why? Because it's been done on the player's terms. The interview has been arranged between the footballer and Neville, and there's a trust between the pair, making the player feel secure enough to share who they truly are. Pre- and post-match interviews, as well as other content that falls under a player's media duties, feels forced, consequently not sharing the player's persona correctly. It makes them appear boring. It's easy to identify a player who wants to be interviewed versus a player who doesn't. The Overlap's interviews have made modern day players feel relatable again. You see, footballers aren't boring. They're all human with their own unique characters. It's just the majority of the media has failed in providing a platform for a player's personality to shine. This also plays into how footballers are perceived. There's a stereotype that they're stupid individuals who lack depth, when that's not the case at all. It takes a huge amount of intelligence to play football professionally. It takes a huge amount of personality as well. I recently saw an incredible short clip from Mind the Game podcast hosted by basketball players LeBron James and JJ Redick. In the clip, LeBron James explains a tactical play called the movement catch and shoot 3. Watching James and Reddick, two great basketball minds, detail the movements the players would take to carry out this play was fascinating.
The 5-man's gonna screen you, bring you to the ball.
Okay.
At the same time, the 3-man's gonna set a cross screen for me, go underneath.
Okay.
All right? As soon as that happens, the 1 is gonna throw it over the top to me. I have to catch it over the top. And as soon as I catch it over the top, because your man is so afraid of you coming towards the ball, what is the first thing a defender does when a ball
Turns his head.
turns his freaking head? As soon as that happened, re-screen for you, Jay.
Yep. Victory.
It opened my eyes, it blew me away. It made me see basketball and its athletes in a completely different light. That's the power of great media. From a football perspective, imagine if we saw elite players talk through and share tactical details with one another. It would be revolutionary. It would showcase their intelligence. You see, the stigma that footballers are boring, one-dimensional, stupid people is a myth. Players just need platforms either set up by themselves or by others to dispel it. A recurring theme that's present throughout the points I've raised is a fear among players to share who they are to the public. From an English perspective, we've seen how the press can target and attack footballers. Look at Raheem Sterling and his gun tattoo. The tattoo reflects a vow he made to never touch a gun after his father was shot dead when he was a child. Yet, just before the World Cup in 2018, the tattoo was put on the front page of the Sun newspaper. They publicly shamed Sterling right before a massive tournament without understanding the personal significance the tattoo held for him. Instances like this highlight why footballers often feel scared to reveal their true selves, fearing misinterpretation and misunderstanding from the press and the public. Additionally, with the rise of social media, every move a player makes off the field can be captured, scrutinised and misconstrued. With the money that footballers earn through their contract with their club and their own personal sponsorships, players simply have too much to lose. If footballers open up, say the wrong thing or are misunderstood, they could be risking their livelihood and their wealth. So, what's the easy thing to do? Not open up, so then you don't have the chance of saying the wrong thing or being misunderstood. With this ever-present threat, can you blame footballers for coming across as boring? When you realise what's on the line, this does beg the question, do they need to be interesting? I believe if players weren't programmed to fear the press at such a young age, and if we reinvented how they're showcased via the media, the public would finally see that footballers are interesting, intelligent, multi-dimensional individuals. We'd see echoes of the characters that once dominated our sport. However, due to the constant attention and therefore scrutiny, and with how much modern day players could lose just for the sake of coming across as more interesting, it's hard to incentivise footballers to showcase their personalities. My conclusion is that footballers aren't boring, but sadly I don't see a world where they'll truly feel comfortable to be themselves publicly.